They told her, the day her mother died, that an omega without a wolf is a candle without a flame, shaped like the thing, but useless in the dark. Sella had carried that sentence for 19 winters. She had stopped arguing with it years ago. Arguing only made people say it again, louder, as though volume were proof. But she had learned something the wolves of Ardenmoor had never bothered to learn, because no one had ever forced them to sit alone long enough to think. A candle gives its light by burning down. It spends itself to be of use. And a thing already spent, already counted as nothing, has one freedom left that the powerful will never taste. It has nothing left to be afraid of. That was the winter she discovered what one coin could buy, and what it could not. Chapter 1. The market at Greythorn smelled of wet straw, copper, and fear, and the fear was the freshest of the three. Sella kept to the edges where the lamplight thinned to nothing. The law of the moor was old and simple. Omegas traded only after the shifters had taken their fill. So by dusk, the stalls held what no creature of standing wanted. Bruised root, knives gone soft at the edge, animals too sick to be sold whole, and too stubborn to have died on schedule. She moved through it the way she moved through everything, quietly, counting. A loaf here gone green at the heel. A merchant there overcharging a blind woman and smiling while he did it. Her mother's voice in her ear, worn to a groove from use. Notice everything, girl. It's the only inheritance the poor are allowed. That was when she saw the cage. It sat apart from the others, iron, rust-eaten, half sunk into the churned mud, as though it were trying to bury itself out of shame. Inside lay a wolf, or the shape a wolf becomes when it has stopped agreeing to be one. Gray gone to ash, ribs like the teeth of a comb pressing up under the hide, one eye crusted shut. The other found her in the dark and held her there, and there was nothing animal in it. The patience in that eye did not belong to a dying beast. It belonged to something that was waiting for her specifically, and had been for a long time. Something in her chest turned over and would not turn back. Won't last the night. The trader didn't trouble himself to rise from his stool. He had the broad, comfortable look of a man who had never gone without, and never would. Found him out at the moor's edge, more dead than living. No collar, no pack mark. Bad meat besides. I'd have put him down already, but my arm's tired. He grinned, showing a gap where a tooth had been. Charity's not in my nature. Sella had no money. She had never had money. What she had was a single copper, worn smooth as a river stone, that her mother had pressed into her palm the night the fever finally won. For the ferryman, her mother had whispered, half a joke and half not, because the dying are allowed both at once. So you'll never cross any river poor. 3 years she had carried it. 3 years and she had crossed nothing. No river, no border, no threshold out of the life she'd been assigned at birth. She stepped forward and set the coin on the trader's plank. He looked at it. He looked at her. Then he laughed, a short, ugly bark with no warmth in it at all. 1 coin, for a corpse with the manners to keep breathing. He swept it off the plank and into his pocket before she could think better of it. Done. Take the thing. You'll save me the cost of a hole. She knelt in the cold mud and worked the rusted latch with fingers that knew how to be patient. Up close, the wolf was enormous, even ruined, longer than she was tall, and the smell of him was wrong, in a way she had no word for. Not rot, not sickness, but something colder underneath, like the air inside a struck bell. When she slid her arms beneath him, bracing for teeth, he did not fight her. He turned that single amber eye up to her face, and from somewhere deep in the wreck of his chest came a sound. Low, cracked. Not a growl, a word. She would have sworn after that it had been almost a word. Easy, she breathed, gathering the dreadful weight of him against her. You hear me? You're worth more than 1 coin. We'll prove the whole rotten lot of them wrong, you and I. She did not see the 2 riders who had drawn up at the mouth of the market. She did not see how they went rigid in their saddles the instant the wolf made his sound. Did not see one of them go white beneath his helm. She felt only the hoofbeats landing close, the lamplight thrown sideways across the mud, and then a gauntleted hand closing around her upper arm, hard enough to grind the bone beneath. "That animal," said the beta who owned the hand, very softly, as though softness might hold back something enormous, "belongs to the king." Chapter 2. The fortress of Ardenmoor was carved straight out of the black rock of the mountain it crowned, so that from below it looked less built than grown, sheer, seamless, flawless, capped in ice that never melted even in high summer. Sella had seen it her whole life from the valley floor, and privately thought it the most beautiful object the world contained. Inside, it was cold in a way that stone alone could not account for. They marched her up through the body of it, hall after hall hung with dark banners, and a silence that had weight to it. Servants flattened themselves to the walls as she passed, not to give way to her, but to keep clear of the thing in her arms. No one offered to carry the wolf. No one would come within a spear's length of it. The beta, Toller, the others called him, in the clipped way men use a name they're afraid of needing, walked a half-step behind her the whole way, and his fear came off him in a smell she could read like a page of plain print. They were afraid of a dying wolf, a half-corpse she had carried up a mountain in her own 2 arms. It made no sense, and so she folded the fact away small, and kept it, the way she kept everything that didn't fit. The pieces that don't fit are the ones worth saving. Her mother again. Always her mother. The throne room doors opened onto a man who did not look up when she entered. He sat low in a chair built too large for any throne, elbows braced on his knees, hands hanging loose between them as though he had set them down somewhere and forgotten to pick them back up. Dark hair unbound, falling across a face she couldn't read. A jaw set like a door that had been shut a long time and meant to stay that way. He wore no crown. He had no need of one. The very air in the room seemed to lean toward him the way water leans toward the pull of a drain. "King Varric," Toller murmured and dropped to one knee, dragging Sella down with him by the arm. "Forgive the hour. We found it. At Greythorn, at the trade stalls. This Omega had it. Had the animal in her arms, my lord." The king raised his head. Sella had braced herself for anger. She had not braced for the color to drain out of a king's face the way water drains out of cupped hands. He came up out of the chair in a single unbroken motion, and steel sang free of its sheath before she had even understood he'd moved. A long blade, level, the point of it hanging a hand's breadth from the hollow of her throat. She did not step back. There was nowhere left behind her to step. His eyes were not on her at all. They were fixed on the wolf in her arms, and they were terrible. "Where?" he said. His voice came out low and very even, and the evenness was far worse than shouting would have been. "Where did you get that?" The wolf stirred against her chest and made the sound again, that cracked not growl, the noise a sleeping man makes when someone in the room says his name aloud. The sword trembled. A king's hand trembling, with the whole court watching. "1 coin," Sella said, carefully. She heard the words leave her as if someone else were spending them. And then, because careful had never once in her life been enough to save her, she let the brave thing loose. He was dying in the mud, my lord, and not one soul in that market wanted him. So I suppose that makes 2 of us standing here unwanted. You can run me through if it pleases you, but it won't lower his worth by a single copper, below what you all paid to walk past him and let him rot." The room stopped breathing. For a long moment Varric only stared at her, and something moved behind his eyes that she could not name. Recognition, maybe, of a kind too painful to wear in public. Slowly, by an inch, the blade came down. "Get her a room," he said, to no one and to everyone. "A good one. And hear me well. If any hand in this fortress touches her without my word, I will have that hand." Then, low, more to himself than to the hall, his gaze never once leaving the ruined animal she held. "He came back. 3 years gone, given up for dead, and he came back." A breath. He came back to her. Came. Chapter 3. They did not lock her door. They simply posted a guard outside it, who would not raise his eyes to her face, which, she reflected, came to precisely the same thing while costing the king a great deal less in dignity. The chamber was finer than any room she had slept in. finer than any she had cleaned. A real bed, deep enough to drown in. A hearth already lit. A window that looked straight down the long throat of the mountain to the valley where she'd been born. She did not let the grandeur of it touch her. Grandeur, she had learned, was usually the lid on a trap. She laid the wolf down on the warm stone before the fire, and did the one truly useful thing she had ever known how to do. She set her hands on him and listened. This was the gift Greythorn had never wanted and had punished her for owning. Sela could feel a wolf's pain the way other people felt the turn of the weather in their knees. She could not heal it. She had given up pretending otherwise long ago. What she could do was hold it. Take a corner of the animal's suffering onto herself and carry it a while, so that the creature could sink down beneath the worst of it and rest. As a small girl, she had soothed the hunter's wounded hounds this way and been beaten bloody for witchcraft. She had learned, after that, to do her one good thing only in the dark, where no one watched. She did it now. Drew a long thread of the wolf's agony up into her own chest and bore it. The great body shuddered once, all over, and then eased. The breathing lengthened, deepened, slid toward something that might just hold until morning. But the cold in him was the strangest thing she had ever touched. It was not the cold of fever, nor of a body failing. It had no flesh to it at all. It was the cold of a house standing empty, every room swept, every lamp dark, the family long gone and not coming back. "You're not only a wolf," she murmured into the dark fur. "Are you? There's a man missing from somewhere, and you're the shape of the whole." She did not expect an answer. She got, instead, the slow press of a heavy skull against her knee. In the morning the door opened without the courtesy of a knock, and the king filled the frame of it. He came no nearer than the threshold. He had washed and dressed and looked now, every inch the ruler the valley feared, except for his hands, which he held unnaturally still at his sides, in the particular way of a man keeping pressure on a wound no one is allowed to see. "He lived," Varric said. "He lived. No one else has been able to lay a hand on him. 3 healers tried in the first weeks. He took the fingers off one of them." His eyes moved over her, openly recalculating, the way a man recounts a sum that has come out wrong. "What are you?" "Tired," she said, before her good sense could catch the word and hold it down. And the corner of the king's mouth moved. Not a smile. He did not seem to have one of those left in working order. It was more like the memory of where a smile had once lived, a long time ago, before something burned the house down. He crossed the room then, slowly, and knelt beside the wolf. The great animal opened its one good eye, saw who it was, and pushed its skull hard into the king's open hand with a low, broken sound that made Varric shut his eyes, as though he had been struck across the face. "What is he to you?" Sela asked very softly. Varric did not answer. He rose. At the door he paused, his back to her. "Whatever you need to keep him breathing," he said, "you have only to ask, and it is yours." She should have asked for the road home, for the open gate and a clear path back down the mountain to her small, free nothing of a life. She turned the chance over in her hands for a long while after the door had shut. She did not ask. She told herself it was for the wolf's sake. She was not yet ready to know it was a lie. Chapter 4. The gift came 3 days on, while the wolf slept and grew, and, impossibly against every law she knew, went a shade less gray. A servant girl led her down into the eastern wing, a part of the fortress where the dust lay thick as felt, and the air had the held-breath stillness of rooms shut up for years. The girl unlocked a heavy door, thrust the key at Sela, and fled back the way they'd come without a word. Beyond the door was a garden, kept under a great vault of glass. It had died, most of it, but Sela's eye, trained on ruin her whole life, read straight through the wreck to what it once had been. Long beds of herbs gone to brown stalk, a dry stone basin, drying racks furred with cobweb, mortars worn pale and smooth in the bowl from years of honest use. Not a pleasure garden, a working one, a healer's room, an apothecary built and tended once by someone who had loved keeping living things alive. Varric stood at the center of all that death, looking entirely out of place among the broken pots, like a sword someone had left standing in a flower bed. "You said you hold pain," he said. He didn't look at her. He looked at the dead beds as though they shamed him personally. "After Greythorn, I asked Toller what you'd done there, in the market. He told me you'd go and sit with the sick beasts the others wouldn't touch. That you'd talk to them, low, where folk couldn't hear." A pause, waited. "He told me you were laughed at for it. The Omega witch who whispers to dying animals. She had told no one in this place any of that. She had told him nothing at all. He had stood and listened to a guardsman's mockery and heard, underneath the cruelty, the true shape of a person. And had remembered it. This was my mother's room," he went on, the words coming rougher now, dragged out over stone. "She kept things alive. Anything broken or failing, she'd carry up here and mend. When she died, I had it sealed, because I could not." He stopped, began again, stripped down, simpler. "It's yours now. Grow whatever you need. For him. For yourself. The whole of it. Yours." Heat climbed Sella's throat, but not the old, familiar prickle of shame she'd worn like a second skin since childhood. Something nearer the exact opposite of shame, and far more dangerous for it. "My lord, this is too much. I can't possibly—" "Don't." The word came hard, and his jaw set against it. "Don't you stand in my mother's garden and tell me what a thing is worth, or isn't. You are the only soul in this entire fortress who has never once gotten that sum wrong. Do not start now." He left her there among the dust and the dead. And Sella pressed her open hand flat against a cracked planting bed and felt, for the first time in more years than she could count, the precise and terrifying sensation of a door swinging open in a wall she had spent her whole life teaching herself to believe was solid stone. That night, on its own, the wolf rose up onto 4 shaking legs, crossed the chamber to her, and walked. Chapter 5. The garden came back faster than anything that had been so dead had any right to. So did the wolf, his gray burning off day by day to reveal something darker and deeper underneath. And so, slowest of the 3, did the king. He took to coming in the evenings, when the court had wrung the last use out of him and let him go. He'd settle on an overturned crate at the edge of the glass house, while she worked the beds in the lamplight, and the wolf dozed in the warmth between them. They spoke little at first. He was not a man built for filling a silence, and she had spent a lifetime learning what silence was good for. What grew up between the two of them in those hours grew the way the garden grew, underground first, in the dark, where no boot could come and trample it before it had roots. She learned the shape of him sideways, the way she learned everything, that he slept badly and rose before the light, that he ate too little, like a man who'd lost the habit of wanting things, that the whole valley called him the Coldmoor King, and said it almost fondly, the way you name a thing to keep it at a safe distance, and that the name sat on him the way a too-tight collar sits on a dog, leaving a raw mark where it rubbed. One evening, with the moonbell glowing pale along the bed she'd just set right, she asked the thing she had carried unspoken for weeks. "What happened to you? Truly. The thing the whole fortress is afraid to say." The fire snapped. The wolf lifted its great head off its paws and watched him. "A witch," Varric said at last, "named Yvain. My father wronged her, badly, years before I took the throne. She let the debt sit. Then she came and collected it from me instead." His thumb moved slowly over an old white scar across one knuckle. "A shifter is 2 souls worn in one skin. The man and the wolf, neither whole without the other. Yvain cut mine clean in 2. She drew the wolf up out of me and turned it loose in the wide world to die alone, so that I'd live out the rest of my years as half a thing. A king who cannot run with his own pack, who cannot shift before them, nor hunt, nor lead them as a true alpha must." His mouth twisted. "They fear me because some animal part of them senses it. The hollow place where the wolf should be and isn't. Fear is the only rope I have left long enough to hold them with." He looked up at her. Then, and something behind his face that had been holding for 3 years, quietly gave way. "For 3 years I've been empty," he said. "A swept and shuttered house. And then one freezing night, a girl with no coin and no name buys my own soul out of a mud cage at the back of a market, for a single copper, because she took one look at the worst-off creature there and decided it was still worth the saving, when I myself had already let it go for dead. The wolf rose, crossed to him, and laid its enormous head down across his knees. Sella's eyes burned. She did not let them spill. She never did, not in front of anyone living. That was a rule older than memory. But her voice, when it came out with all its armor lying on the ground. "They told me an Omega born without a wolf is a candle without a flame," she said. "Shaped like the real thing, and good for nothing. I believed it most of my life, my lord. I have no wolf either. I am the other half of a nothing, same as you." She made herself hold his gaze and not look away from it. "So, I know exactly what your court catches the scent of when you pass, because they've been catching it on me since the hour I was born." He did not pity her. That, of everything, was the thing she would keep longest. He crossed the small space between them, took her stained and calloused hand up in both of his, and held it the way a man holds something he has only just understood he cannot afford to lose. "Then they are fools," Varric said, "twice over and down to the bone, because the most whole thing I have laid eyes on in 3 barren years walked uninvited into my hall, in rags, carrying the lost half of me in her 2 arms, and called it worth more than a king." Chapter 6. The almost yes came on the longest night of the year. The garden was fully alive by then, breathing out green and a clean, bitter sweetness into the dark, and the wolf was gray no longer. It had come back deep, storm dark, and near its full great size, near whole. It had not yet rejoined him. It could not, Varric said, for Yvain's curse held one last lock he had spent 3 years failing to find the key to. But it slept now at the foot of the king's own bed, and walked at his heel through the black halls, and the court had begun to whisper, uneasy, that the Coldmoor king was thawing at the edges. Selah was cutting sprigs of moonbell for the drying rack when he came in out of the cold, with snow still melting in his dark hair, and stopped nearer to her than he had ever let himself stand. "Stay," he said, a single word. She understood the whole of what was folded inside it. "I would make you my queen." He pitched it low, only for her. Not for what an Omega's meant to give a pack. Heirs, alliances, a strong line. I want none of that, and never have. I want the woman who stood in my hall with a blade at her throat and told a king to his face that his soul was worth more than he'd paid to throw it away. His hand rose to the line of her jaw and hovered there, not quite touching the skin. "Say yes, Selah. That's all. Just yes." She felt the yes come up in her like the whole garden coming up at once, wild and green and utterly terrified of the light. And she felt, right on its heels, the full gray weight of 19 winters land on top of it. A candle without a flame. The other half of nothing. They take these things from you in the end. They always do. Every single time. And wanting is only the long, slow road back round to losing. "I can't," she whispered. She stepped back out of the reach of his hand and hated every inch of the retreat even as her feet made it. "I'm sorry, I can't. Forgive me." She fled to her chamber with her heart slamming against her ribs and lay awake until the candle guttered. So she did not hear, far below her in the great hall, the long, low note of a war horn sounding at the outer gate. She did not know that Drust of the Iron Reach, an alpha half again Varric's size, who had spent 3 patient years waiting for hard proof that the Coldmoor king was hollow at the core, had ridden up the mountain under a truce banner with 40 wolves at his back and 1 demand on his tongue. That at first light, by the oldest law the pack still kept, Varric would meet him in the challenge ring. Wolf against wolf. To the death. And that Varric had no wolf left to send. Chapter 7. She had it from the servants at dawn, in the way you learn that someone you love is already as good as buried. "He'll be torn to pieces." The girl who brought the morning water had gone white to the lips. "Everyone knows it now. The king can't shift, hasn't been able to in years, and Drust found it out somehow. That's why he's come. To strip him bare in front of the whole pack and take the crown off what's left." Selah was running before the water cup had finished shattering on the floor. The challenge ring lay deep in the fortress's belly, open at the top to a flat iron sky, ringed all around by the whole pack standing in tiered and breathless silence. Drust was already at the center of it, vast, scarred, grinning, half-shifted, so that black claws curved from the ends of a man's broad hands. Across from him stood Varric, in plain clothes, weaponless as the old law required, his face shut back down into the closed door she'd seen the first night in the hall. He meant to die standing, she understood, with a clarity that turned her stomach to ice. He would let Drust kill the man and keep the king's secret in the grave, rather than let the pack watch him fail to shift and name him hollow while he yet lived. "Where is your beast, Coldmore?" Drust's voice rolled around the stone ring like a stone itself. 3 years you've held this mountain on rumor and fear. So show them. Shift. Or own before your own pack that you're a gutted man in a borrowed crown. And let me lift it off your corpse. The silence had teeth in it now. Every wolf there had begun to lean forward. Sella shoved through the packed bodies to the very lip of the ring. "Stop! Stop this, please!" Varric's head came round. He found her in the crush of the crowd, and what crossed his face then was almost peace. The strange ease of a man grateful that the last thing he would ever look upon turned out to be the right one. "Go inside," he called to her, and gentled it, of all things, for her. "You shouldn't be here to watch this. Go, Selah. You can't fight him, not without your—" "I know exactly what I cannot do," he said. "I have always known. Go." Drust lunged, claws first, and the wolf came. It came out of the deep gate shadows like a piece of the night itself, tearing loose from the rest, storm dark, full-grown, whole, and it took Drust in the side at the height of his leap and bore him down into the snow with a roar that shook ice loose from the high battlements. The pack screamed as one. Sellah's heart stopped dead in her chest. The wolf, his wolf, the dying ruin she had carried up a mountain for one worn copper, stood with its jaws at the fallen Alpha's throat and turned its single amber eye away from its enemy, away from its king. It turned that eye to her, and in that look she finally understood the shape of the last lock, what Freely had to mean, what Yvain's curse had truly demanded all along, and why Varric, who could command an entire pack through fear, had never once been able to satisfy it, because no soul in all his cold kingdom had ever offered him a single thing without first setting a price on it. The wolf returns to the man only when the one who bought its life chooses him, and asks for nothing back. It had been waiting, this whole time, for her, yes. And she had stood in a garden full of moonbell and told him no. Chapter 8. Drust heaved and thrashed beneath the great jaws. The wolf held him, but even as it held, it began to flicker. The way a flame gutters and thins when the wax beneath it runs low, fraying at the edges into smoke. It could not hold its own shape. It could not fully be, not while it remained a thing apart, divided still from the man it belonged to and the woman who had refused to claim it. Varric saw it, failing. So did Drust. The Alpha wrenched himself free, flung the thinning wolf off into the snow, and surged back up onto his feet, with murder written plain across his face. And Varric, unarmed, wolfless, half a man, stepped into the gap, put his own unprotected body squarely between Drust's claws and the last flickering remnant of his own soul, to shield it, to buy it one more breath of life with his. It was the most reckless thing Selah had ever watched a powerful man do, and it would kill him inside the next 3 heartbeats. The entire court watched their cold and dreaded king throw his life down over a guttering, dying wolf, and not one of them understood the why of it. Selah understood. She vaulted the rail and dropped into the ring and ran out across the bloodied snow, and the words tore out of her with no armor left on them anywhere at all. No caution, no careful spacing. The brave, blurted thing that had been clawing to get free of her for 19 winters finally loose. Yes. Do you hear me? Yes. I choose you, Varric. I want nothing. I never wanted one single thing in this world but you, so come back to me. Now. The wolf's head came around, and it ran. Not at the Alpha. At the king. It struck him full in the chest, and did not knock him down. It went into him, storm dark dissolving like ink into water, into skin. and Varric arched backward with a cry that was agony and homecoming braided into one single sound. When he rose up off his knees, he rose up changed, taller in the air around him, the weight of him gone whole and dense, the empty house lit in every window at once. And out of his throat tore a howl that was two voices wound together into one at long last, the man and the wolf, and every wolf around that ring dropped to its belly in the snow. Drust ran. He did not stop to look back. Varric crossed the ring to her through the kneeling pack, and took her face in both his hands, breathing hard, alive, complete. The snow melting now, wherever it dared to touch him. "You came back," she said, shaking under his hands. "You called. Simple. Raw, with no king left anywhere in it. I'll always come when you call. I love you, Selah. I think I loved you from the first night, when you stood with my blade at your throat and told me what I was worth." His forehead came down to rest against hers. "Don't run from me again. I've spent years enough being half of something." "No more running," she promised, and this time the yes in her had no fear at all left underneath it. The garden had grown all the way up to flower. "We were neither of us ever nothing. We never were." They were wrong the whole time. Epilogue, 1 year later. The eastern garden under glass was the warmest room in all of Ardenmoor now, and far and away the busiest. They came up the long mountain road to reach it, shepherds with foundering ewes slung across their shoulders, children clutching birds with broken wings, and twice, to the astonishment of the whole fortress, hard-faced wolves of distant packs carrying their own pups, too sick to so much as mew. The queen turned none of them away, whatever their rank or their lack of one. The court had given up calling her lord the Coldmoor king somewhere over the summer. They had not yet agreed on what ought to come after it. Selah thought Varric would serve well enough. He found her among the moonbell at dusk. The wolf, only ever one creature now, running quiet in his blood where it belonged, pacing easy at his heel. In his open palm he held something very small. A copper coin, worn smooth as a river stone. He had spent the better part of half a year hunting it down through the back stalls of Greythorn, and had bought it back at last from a thunderstruck trader for a sum that could have purchased the man's entire stall, his cart, and the mule that pulled it. He pressed it into her hand and closed her fingers over it. The ferryman's coin. Her mother's coin. "You told me he was worth more than one coin," Varric murmured into her hair. "You were wrong about that, you know. You undersold me badly." She laughed, and the sound came up easy and unforced now, where once every laugh had cost her dearly. "1 coin," she said, turning the old copper over in the green and failing light, "for a dying wolf and a hollow king both. I'd say I came out well ahead of the bargain." "You came out whole," he answered. "We both did. In the end." Below them, the great fortress that had always looked so perfect from the valley floor glowed, for once, for the first time in living memory. Warm all the way through to its black stone heart. And the candle that had spent 19 long winters being told again and louder each time, that it had no flame to give, burned steady and bright in the dark. It gave its light the only way a candle ever truly can. Freely, wanting nothing back. And worth, in the end, far more than anyone had ever once thought to pay for it.